We'll call the Senate Finance Committee meeting to order, and as soon as I get around the other side, the
We
acting chair will.
open the hearing on Senate Bill 407. Yes. Brent? Good afternoon, Senator.
My name is James Gray. I'm Senator representing Senate District 6, which starts in Rochester and Stratford and goes up Route 11 to Alton and Gillington. I'm here to introduce Senate Bill 407, make an appropriation to each full-time student eligible for in-state tuition. This is probably not feasible for this year. But we need to start having a discussion about how we are going to fund UNH, USNH, and community college. Certainly with the atmosphere over in the House about the things that we tried to do last year, it's not sustainable. Right now, what I would like to see happen, not this year maybe, but next year in a real budget, is that there be an appropriation for capital items. There be an appropriation for mandatory education that the legislature has prescribed. And there are different people who do get free tuition over at the university system. And then a dollar figure per semester, per student, or some other formula that would reduce the tuition for New Hampshire students from whatever to, and that would be the in-state tuition, would be that reduction. The purpose of the thing like that would be such that the people who are interested in it would contact their legislator and say, I don't want you to vote to reduce the subsidy that you're giving because that's going to increase the tuition and will have much more impact, I believe, on the representatives and the senators in how they fund the things. If they decide that we're going to give away more free education and they don't fund it, then it can't happen. If we're going to do a capital project, fine. And there may be other categories that you would want to do. But giving them, other than capital stuff right now, one lump sum does not sit well, especially over in the House of Representatives, because they believe that there is alternative motives in there. They believe that they're going to spend it on things. But this, if it were structured such that this was a reduction in the tuition, certainly I'm interested in the $10 million cut that we're having between this year and next year in the university system. We went from 97 million with about 5 or 6 of that being an appropriation for some construction and reconstruction, and then down to 87 for this year, and then 77 for the year after. That is putting a lot of strain on the things that we're doing in the university and the university system to make sure that we were squeezing out every dollar and every ounce of work that we can get out of the employees such that we can make those cuts and actually survive. So this is an opening thing. Certainly I will be interested in the senators' discussion about what's happening. I presented similar comments to the Board of Trustees, the Finance Committee. I do not have their endorsement. I just have, several of them coming in and saying, yes, we need to do something, and this seems like the best thing that they've heard so far. But in no way do I want to represent this as the University System Board of Trustees endorsing it, because they have not. Okay. And I want to make sure that that's clear. All right. And I'll shut up now.
All right. Will you take questions, Senator?
Absolutely.
All right, are there questions? Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator. I'm glad you brought this forward. I think it sends a good signal to families that are thinking about coming to UNH and those who are there, that we care about them and want to do something for them. My question is, you know, of course, as you have mentioned, the issue here is, well, where's the money? And I wondered about whether or not you would have given thought to actually designating the source of these funds as from the extra funding that we're bringing in with the tax holiday program.
Certainly the abatement program that we're running right now is doing well, but there are other funds that aren't doing well, so I don't know that those funds are actually available. And I don't anticipate that from the discussions that we've had in the past with DRA, that you know, you run one of these and then you have to wait, you know, 5 or 10 years for things to happen such that there is a reason to offer it again. But in executive session, after we get there, I'm certainly willing to discuss any of those things. But we do need to look into the future. How do we get a stable funding to the university system and hopefully to the community college system that they can depend on and that will be supported on both the House and the Senate?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I appreciate the sentiment around the number that goes up and down. It's difficult for the university to plan in that case. I wonder, how did you come up with the $300?
I picked it out of a warm, dark place.
All right. Very good. I won't say I appreciate that, but thank you for your answer. Senator Lang.
Why are we not addressing the community college system as well?
The community college system has, the House has a different opinion of them, okay? And so in this particular bill, which again, I have no expectations that it'll get funded the way it is. If it does get funded, it'll probably be pushed into next year. And then the next finance committee is going to have to deal with what they do and what they don't do. The $300 right now wouldn't help the university system because it would be money that would go to the students. And so that's not exactly the way I would like to see it happen. But the community college, when I spoke with their current chancellor, they're not experiencing the same kind of problems that the university system is. But the problem is if I do something with one, then I probably need to do something similar to the other one. And exactly what that is yet to be determined.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thinking about funding sources, have you given any thought to our fee agreement with Fidelity, which I don't think has been renegotiated since we launched the 529 plans? And I'm just wondering if you think there's room to maybe look at what that fee is. It brings in significant money that we could dedicate to higher ed.
Maybe you, being the senior member of the Democrats on finance, and myself can meet with the LBA and see if we can look at that.
I'd be happy to do that.
And LBA can bring in anybody else they want.
Warren Buffett.
If he'll come and we don't have to pay him, hey, I'd be happy to have him here.
Thank you.
Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. I think you answered it. I just want to make sure so I'm clear. This $300, is it going to go to reduce the students' tuition with the college?
That is the way the bill is written right
Okay.
now.
All right, thank you. That's
But, you know, as the university has told me, that doesn't help them a bit.
No.
Because it doesn't help reduce their $10 million difference between this year and next year, because the way this is written right now, the $300 would be for that student,
Yep.
and the university would still get the same tuition that it was getting.
Thank you.
True. Yes, okay.
But again, I'm not suggesting that this bill get passed the way it is. It's a way of opening this conversation and trying to find a way to fund the university system and the community college system in a way that makes sense, that helps to retain our youngest and brightest students here in New Hampshire. Certainly a student that goes out of state is much less likely to live here in the future than a student that goes to the university system, the community college system, or one of our other fine institutions of higher education.
Very well put. Any other questions for the senator? Seeing none, thank you for introducing the bill. Catherine Provencher from the University System of New Hampshire, along with Lauren Banker, I believe. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Catherine Provencher. I serve as a chancellor of the university system. We very much appreciate Senator Gray's sponsoring this legislation. I can get into, whether or not anything would benefit the bottom line, if you will, of the university system with a tuition reduction, but we're eager to partner with anyone who has solutions on how we can continue to recruit, attract, retrain, and retain the talent in our state. It's really about workforce. I'm sure you've heard Mike Skelton say that we have the oldest workforce in the country. Over 27% of our workforce is over the age of 55. And so having a pipeline of young talent is critical to the economy and employers across the state. The state support for the university system does buy down in-state tuition. That's why there's a tuition differential, and it's about half. And then there's another portion of the state appropriation that is allocated to what we call state mandated programs, primarily cooperative extension. About $14 million of the appropriation is allocated to those programs. Again, the bulk of that being cooperative extension. We also incur over $4.5 million a year in tuition waivers, primarily to the National Guard. That's statutorily mandated, and we fund that out of our budget. Again, as Senator Gray mentioned, the state support drops to $77 million in fiscal '27. That is a big chunk. You'll recall, my board chair and I testified to Senate Finance back in the spring, and our modeling showed that we had to take tens of millions of dollars out of the cost structure over the next 5 years because of changes in higher education, because enrollment is declining. We know that. And that was before the reduction in state support. So this is, next year is going to be extremely difficult for the university system. We have done a number of things to take costs out, reduce faculty headcount, reduce staff headcount, reduce the number of executive officers, reduce medical benefits, increase premiums, reduce retirement contributions, take down buildings. We're reducing the footprint more because it's necessary. And despite all that, it's quite possible we'll be in the red in fiscal '27, but we're working on solutions. It's starting to impact enrollment as well for this fall. We survey UNH students who are accepted but don't join us, and 13% of those students said the reason they didn't come was because of the uncertainty around the reduction in state support. And we're also hearing concerns from employers. Can we continue to deliver on their workforce needs? So any support in continuing to partner. This is a partnership, I believe, between employers, public higher education, and the government in developing our workforce and our economy for the future of New Hampshire. Any initiatives to help bolster that partnership, the university system is on board. And I would say that, excuse me, again, I think that additional state support signals to our students and their families and employers that the partnership is valued and that the university system has a place with the state and employers in growing the economy of the future. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, questions for the chancellor?
Sure.
Anybody? Well, I'll ask one. So this is a sort of demographic cliff.
Mhm.
We've known for a decade plus this was coming.
Mhm.
What's the university doing to try to grow enrollment? Because President Chilton told us at our legislative briefing that the states around us saw an increase in enrollment this year, and we saw a decrease. State funding, based on the survey data you shared, could be part of it, but I just find it hard to believe that it's all of it. So what I'm hearing from the university system a lot is, oh, we're cutting.
Mhm.
Where are you growing? How are you trying to improve to attract those students? Are you consolidating programs, focusing resources? What really should encourage us to make an investment of this sort?
Sure. So we are consolidating programs and services, and we're, excuse me, we're leaning into those programs that are growing. You
Mhm.
probably know, Senator, that more than half the students at UNH focus on 4 program areas.
Yep.
And those program areas are key to New Hampshire's needs right now. Business, healthcare, biotech, biomedical.
Mhm.
Oh, I have it at the tip of my
Is it
tongue.
engineering?
It's engineering,
Yep.
thank you.
I'm here for you.
And so, I mean, and so we're leaning into those programs. The same thing over at Keene. President Burks is leaning into what do the employers in a 50-mile radius of Keene State College need
Mhm.
for the future of their workforce? And he's done the same at Plymouth. So that's exactly what we're doing. We are changing. We are not, I will say we're not the university system of even 25 years ago.
Mhm.
We are leaning into what our employers need, and we have partnerships with thousands of employers around the state to help us with curriculum. Unlike the community college system, we're not going to change a program on a dime
Right.
and offer a certificate. Well, we could, but we're working with employers on what do you think the needs are 4 years from now, 6 years from now, so the faculty can work on a curriculum that meets those needs.
Any other questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I wonder if you would agree with me that if you can't write a coherent grammatical paragraph, you're not going to be good at any of those other 4 other areas either.
I agree with you 100%. I'm not the only one. That's survey data from around the country from employers that students need to be able to effectively communicate, not just write a sentence, but speak, work on a team, interact with people who are different from them. And that is why we have a general education program that connects those skill sets with skills that our students need to succeed, not just in their first job, but their second job, and hopefully gain a love of learning for the rest of their life. So that, absolutely, I don't know what, you can call it whatever you want. You can call them soft skills, you can call it the liberal arts, whatever you want to call it, but that's a key to any, helping any student succeed in today's workforce. You have to be adaptable too, right? Because we don't know what skills folks are going to need even a half a dozen years from now.
Okay. One last question. The $300 number, I'm not sure that's enough to move that many families or students. 1,000 be a little better, kind of gets their attention a little more. But these funds essentially would lower the cost for a student. And you and I have talked in the past about price elasticity of demand, and the system thinks it's fairly tight.
It is tight. We can't, in this market, we really don't have wiggle room to increase tuition at, 5% or not in this market.
Right.
And so I mean, I suppose someone could have said, well, university system, you can just increase tuition to make up for a reduction in state support. We could, but then we're not going to, I think we'd lose even more enrollment, and that's not going to benefit our state in the future for workforce. So, listen, $300 is $300. Not going to sneeze at $300. And it's a message to students and families that we're working on a solution. We might not have the final solution, but we're working on a solution.
All right. Senator Birdsell.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. As a university, are you finding that some of the students coming in from into the freshman year are lacking some of the skills required for a freshman in college?
Senator, I'll be honest, anecdotally, yes, but let me do a little more digging. I'm meeting with the provost later this week. Let me do a little more digging, and I don't have any specifics or survey data for you on that, but let me get back to you if that would be helpful.
I want to take that one, but it's not my role. So we'll wait on you, Chancellor. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Senator Lang.
what's the cost per credit at the university system?
The cost per credit,
Well, full-time tuition, we can back it up from there, right?
full-time tuition I have.
Yeah.
Full-time tuition at UNH is $15,900. That's what I'll call the sticker price.
Yeah.
That includes no financial aid, and almost 90% of our students receive financial aid. And so, is it 12?
12.
I'm sorry.
So 24 a year.
You can't do that.
I'm from Ways and Means. I love math.
That's $1,300 a credit.
Thank you.
And I will say that New Hampshire no longer has the distinction of having the highest in-state tuition. UConn
You're right.
and UVM are higher than New Hampshire.
Yeah. Okay. Senator Gray says it's actually 16 credits a year. Yeah. Well, that's right. 4 4-hour courses. So yeah. So 32. It's actually a good bit less.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's 500.
Our esteemed
It's a
trustee.
big difference.
A little
I'm
bit
sorry.
different.
I'm sorry.
You are an engineer. Yes, sir. You are. All right. Any other questions for the Chancellor? All right. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on Senate Bill 407 who maybe didn't sign up? All right. Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. And in a moment, move on to 602. So, I'm working with the governor on something. This is for him. You'd think I'd know how many courses students.
All right, we'll call up the prime sponsor, and while she's coming up, I did want to make a comment on Senator Rosenwald's comment about being able to write a coherent sentence. Us engineers, like I say, I are an engineer. We're good with the numbers.
Since you're the subject of the sentence. I was
Amen.
class grammarian in 8th grade,
That's why I said it that way, is that we're not noted for our spelling, grammar, and a few other things. Senator, when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee. We're going to be hanging together for a little while here this afternoon. My name is Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka. For the record, I am the senator representing District 21, consisting of Portsmouth and the surrounding towns. I'm here to introduce SB 602 relative to withholding state payments to the federal government in response to suspended federal aid. I'm here to introduce this bill because we have seen a lot of federal uncertainty in terms of federal funds being available to help fund our budget. They're an important source of revenue for our state budget, as we all know, and you guys know best of all. They're about a third of our state budget, and our state budget does important stuff. They're funds that help that help educate our children, that help children get to safe daycares, that keep our farms running, help support our small businesses, help our universities. And so it's important that we have some predictability in those funds and have some way that the state can kind of make sure that we're protecting ourselves in the event of some of this uncertainty. And so there are other states that have introduced similar measures across the country. And in this way, I think we're just sort of making sure that New Hampshire, again, has sort of a mechanism to protect itself in the event that there are events which we have seen that threaten us being able to do our job as a state, make sure that we are building a solid federal state budget, that we are making sure that the revenue sources we say will be there, and that we have a mechanism to act on in case they are not. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Lang.
Couldn't this create a spiral downward? Meaning that the federal government withholds money, so we withhold money, so they withhold more money as a penalty response to us. And in the meantime, our taxpayers are all on the hook.
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for the question. I mean, it's a little bit of an unusual time, right? And so there are probably events that will transpire in our lifetime that we couldn't predict now. There's certainly prudence in exercising any powers we would consider under this, but I think it's really important to keep in mind that our granite staters are depending on us and depending on these funds to live their daily lives.
Follow up?
So in particular, I'm looking at the fiscal note and the response from the DAS. In the
Yeah.
last two sentences, the Federal Treasury Offset Program allows the federal government to reduce states' access to federal funds in response to us not paying bill. And as a result, DAS indicates this bill poses a risk to the state's cash flow, jeopardize federal funding, and could expose the state to substantial financial problems.
Yes.
Do you agree with that statement? Do you disagree with that statement? Do you think that that's a possibility and could cause us greater harm?
I think that in this environment, we need to be ready for New Hampshire to stand up for itself. I think in the event that we were to get to a situation like this, we certainly would have people involved that would help make the decision for what's best for New Hampshire, but without some kind of mechanism for us to be able to protect ourselves, we're really sort of at the whims of the federal government.
Additional questions from the senators?
Thank you, sir.
They seem to want to hear from you in your next bill, right?
They probably do.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. You're the only one that has signed up. And do I have the list of how many signed up online? I don't think so. Okay. All right. With that, we will close the public hearing on 6:02, and we have 5 more minutes for the next issue. I'm not going to worry about going into exec session, so you will be in recess for the 5 minutes. I'm here to save you from this conversation, and we'll call the Senate Finance Committee back to order. I think we were over the edge and heading down the hill.
Lima beans and all.
It being time, we will open the hearing on the next bill. And as soon as I get the high sign, are we ready? Go for it, Senator. Introduce yourself on the bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins Coca, representing District 21, home to the University of New Hampshire's flagship campus in Durham. Senate Bill 604 is the straightforward measure to restore the funding which was cut in last year's budget for the university system and for the community college system. Funding cuts in recent years have totaled $35 million. The impact to the students has been measurable. New Hampshire already has the most expensive state colleges for in-state students, which are likely to increase further due to these cuts. These policies have acted to the detriment of our young working Granite Staters. As a result of these cuts, the community college system has also been forced to increase tuition. For many, especially those in the North Country, our community colleges are the most economic and efficient means of obtaining better employment and producing a stronger workforce for the trades and for healthcare services. This bill simply restores the $14 million and $3.5 million in funding cut for the USNH and community college systems, respectively. These are sound investments in our workforce development, affordability for our youngest constituents, and will be paid dividends into the future with a more educated workforce for our many small businesses and industries. I respectfully ask for the committee's support in restoring these funds so that we may enhance educational opportunities for our young Granite Staters. And I understand the chairman had a related bill earlier in the session, which he and I have discussed. So happy to offer this and answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm setting aside for a moment the university system. Wouldn't it be fair to say that this appropriation to the community college system of New Hampshire would immediately impact and increase the number of folks who would go to the community college system?
Yeah, tuition, is one of the main barriers for a lot of students. And so being able to provide these funds and make sure that we're keeping college affordable is a real economic opportunity pathway.
If I may follow up.
Certainly.
And isn't this particularly timely because states around us are offering reduced or free community college tuition, and especially in the border areas and elsewhere, it's just very difficult for us to see the 20-30% increase in community college system enrollments we've seen in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maine.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And as you also know, we're in competition for workforce for our businesses here in New Hampshire. So it's our job to do what we can to ensure that that workforce is there, that our economy can continue to grow. Thank you.
Additional questions from the senators? Thank you very much, Senator. Catherine Provencher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, Catherine Provencher, Chancellor for our state's university system. The university system certainly supports Senate Bill 604 and thanks the sponsors for seeing the value in the university system and all that it provides to benefit our citizenry. As I testified earlier on Senate Bill 407, this really is about workforce and pipeline. The competition across New England is fierce. Senator Waters' question about our surrounding states. Our surrounding states are also doubling down on investment, not just in community college system, but more scholarship to keep their students in state, and not only keep their students in state, but take our students. The University of Maine system has offered in-state tuition to any student, New England, New York, I believe maybe even New Jersey. University of Massachusetts in Lowell also offers in-state tuition for any student who lives in a 50-mile radius. Well, a 50-mile radius of Lowell is the population centers of New Hampshire. So again, we're all competing for regional workforce. Restoring funding for the university system, I'd say would have an immediate impact on keeping New Hampshire students in New Hampshire. course, I haven't cleared this with my board or my presidents either, but a restoration of funds could very well provide the ability for the university system to continue freezing in-state tuition. We had a 6-year freeze because of support from the state. As I mentioned earlier, our students are, many of our students are majoring in those areas where New Hampshire's needs of the future are. We know that the reduction is adding to uncertainty. I'll leave it at that. Adding to uncertainty with students and families. And students and families in New England just have so many choices. So again, we are encourage the committee to vote ought to pass on Senate Bill 604.
All right, thank you very much. The questions from the senators? One thing that neither you nor the prime sponsor has done is give me a way to get the money. I'm not asking for that today, but as we move into executive sessions on this bill, certainly those kind of comments will be highly anticipated. Let's put it that way. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There was only one other person that signed up and did not check the box to speak, and that is the Chancellor of the Community College System. So, is there anyone else that wants to speak on this bill? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And the next one is due to start at 2:15, so we have 10 minutes. I guess there's enough of us now. If you want to go into executive session and discuss anything, I can take the motion. If not, we can wait to get there. Certainly. We are in recess until Okay, we'll call the Senate Finance Committee back out of recess. And we're ready for the next bill. And we have the,
She's running right in sequential order. It's
and one more bill.
Okay.
And we have an audience this
Yeah.
time. All right. Ms. Martone, you ready? All right. And we have the prime sponsor. If you introduce yourself in the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. Esteemed members of the committee, my name is Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka, for the record, representing District 21. And I am here to introduce Senate Bill 605 relative to special assessment requests from pooled risk management programs. We all probably remember that there was a late file bill last year dealing with risk pools and sort of the ripple effects that that had throughout the state. In my case, Portsmouth is one of the largest members of Health Trust, and there was talk about how sort of that bill would have affected premiums and special assessments that needed to be collected. And so, having built a municipal budget for 4 years, you know, these sort of costs are really impactful, and coming up with a $4 million special assessment in a 1-year cycle would have been pretty difficult. So this bill is fairly simple. It just states that if there is an assessment that is levied, then political subdivisions, you know, shall have time to pay in installments over the course of 36 months from the date of invoice, just to give our municipalities time to budget and adapt to changes in this market. I did have a conversation with the Secretary of State about this bill, and you know, this period of time may not be something that everybody supports. I do think it's important that we have a period over which these assessments can be charged. Better yet would be to avoid assessments altogether and create a more predictable system. But in the meantime, I think we need to act to protect our property taxpayers, make sure there's some safeguards here to give municipalities a little bit of a buffer from unexpected costs that could come up in a budget cycle where the budget's already made. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the senators. Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Senator. You know, we spent a lot of time on this last year in this committee and didn't finally come up with a solution. But in terms of your bill, you know, some concerns about the impact of stretching these payments out. I wondered if, I mean, it seemed to me that related to this is the issue about how much the health trust can hold in reserve rather than sending it back.
Absolutely.
And if they'd
Yep.
had more in reserve, maybe they wouldn't have this kind of wild swings. Would it make some sense to you to think about changing this to include an increase in the amount of reserves and then changing the effective date for this out, say, a year or so, so that the reserves could build up a little bit, and then the anticipation of how this might work over 36 months would be done in relationship to maybe there would be increased reserves anyways.
Yeah, thank you. I'm open to different versions of this. I think taking on the reserves level is an important piece of how this unfolds for our municipalities. That said, we heard an awful lot of testimony in this committee last year about what the appropriate reserve levels are, you know, in commercial underwriting and for a product of this type. And so while I'm open to that, I do believe there are two pieces of legislation, one in each body, that purport to deal with how those reserves are regulated. So happy to discuss further, but I think the scope of this might be best served to stay narrow.
Follow-up?
Thank you. And I know there's the other bill, and I'm glad we're going to take some serious look at this. You know, you had experience on a city council, and so I've seen this at the local level, and I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of other insurance issues when you were in municipal office as well. Do you think, you know, just looking at where we're at with these risk pools, do you think it would make more sense for for all of these to be managed by the insurance department, or they have expertise rather than the Secretary of State?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I am of the belief that it would be better to regulate these risk pools inside the insurance department because they serve the same function as insurance for our municipalities. And if they were to face financial insolvency, it would be a major event for our municipalities and for their taxpayers, which are all of our Granite Staters. So I'm of that opinion. That said, this bill is limited because I know that that's an active policy debate we're all having. At the end of the day, how these risk pools operate, the fact that they need to be underwritten according to sort of widely accepted standards, and that if they were, we really wouldn't see any of these assessments and my bill would be unnecessary. That said, in the meantime, I do think it's important to sort of have this safeguard in place for the municipalities. Thank
Senator
you.
Rosenbaum, you had a question.
Actually, Senator Waters asked my 2 questions.
All right.
And we didn't coordinate.
But I still didn't forget you. That's
Thank you.
important. All right, questions from the other senators? Senator Lang?
So the 36 months
Yeah.
that are required, what happens if it's 3 consecutive years where they are under capitalized and that number just keeps growing and growing and growing? Is that not of concern?
I mean, I think we don't want to be in that situation to begin with. As Senator Waters mentioned, that has more to do with the levels of reserves. We really should not be seeing these assessments. The collection of premiums and, rebates should be well thought out and underwritten. But we obviously want to make sure these risk pools remain solvent. And so for me, the 36 months represents a balance between the fact that municipalities have budgets. They can only allocate funds once a year. So asking them to do that all in one budget cycle where they may have already written their budget or, allocated all the funds they've collected is one piece. If there's another time period that you're interested in, I'm happy to discuss that. I discussed the same thing with the Secretary of State. But in the meantime, again, stabilizing the exposure to the taxpayer on this, I think is also important.
Follow-up?
So in an item H on here, which says that we can't require a special assessment. So even if it's undercapitalized and even if they are below funding levels and they can't meet their claims, we're saying that we can't require them to recoup their costs to stay solvent.
That's not how I would read this respectfully. H, I would read to say nothing in this paragraph shall be construed to mean that special assessments be required. So in other words, the language in here is intended to be highly conditional. If there is an assessment that's given, then this would dictate the time period over which it's collected.
Okay.
All right.
Not trying to legalese you, I promise. That's just how I read it.
Senator, my question comes about, well, who should be the regulatory body? When I look at risk pools, a group of towns or entities get together, they form more or less a corporation type of an organization, and then they, from their rules and regulations that go along with the statute, are the ones who administer that. And since the local governments are the ones, I should say the Secretary of State is the one that governs, that type of thing, including corporations, why would your testimony be that the insurance company is the right place to put this?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And I know this is an active debate, but in my mind, again, our municipalities and our public employees and our taxpayers depend on these products being there. And we wouldn't even be having this conversation if it had never arisen that there was some financial instability inside of these risk pools. And so that is nothing to say necessarily about anyone, but I think where they are serving the function of insurance, they need to act like insurance, they need to be dependable like insurance, they need to be underwritten like insurance, they need the consumer protections of an insurance product. They're best regulated by the insurance department, who already is very familiar with all those requirements and operations.
We'll discuss that more in executive session, but
Sure.
I do think that any testimony you have that says that they actually followed what their actuaries had told them to do, and they were meeting the requirements the Secretary of State laid down, and then got into financial difficulties, I would certainly be interested in that testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Health Trust, we have two people from Health Trust. You guys coming up together or separately or whatever? Last year, I did have the chairman of the Health Trust Committee come up and testify and not identify that he was a member of that organization. I do not want that to happen again. So anyone who comes up, I want them to identify their association with this. If you would introduce yourselves. Red button, you need a red light.
Good afternoon, Jean Herrick. I'm General Counsel at Health Trust.
Scott DeRoche, Executive Director at Health Trust.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I have some written comments, then we'd be happy to answer questions. Thank you for the opportunity to
If
testify.
it's written comments and we already have it, then what you should do is summarize your written comments, speak to us, and not read because we all can read, and if we've got it, that's the way I'd like to do it.
Okay. The important piece of our written testimony is the acknowledgement that there are two types of risk pools that operate in the state of New Hampshire, assessable and non-assessable. If you're going to issue an assessment, if you have a shortfall in funds, or if you're maintaining sufficient funds so that you do not issue an assessment, it's the level of protection that the public sector entity enjoys from the risk pool. There are risk pools of that type or of those two types all across the country that are successful all across the country. Diversity is good. It's good to have different choices within New Hampshire. Both models can operate successfully. I do believe the testimony that was provided just prior to us was very important related to the level of reserves. Both models need the appropriate level of reserves to function. What was proposed last year in SB 297 was that risk pools should hold 12 to 16% in reserves and be an assessable risk pool if that were to prove insufficient. That's too little in reserves to hold. The national average through the Association of Governmental Risk Pools, which is the leading industry group, states that on average, 34 to 38% of contributions are held in reserves by risk pools across the country. So 12 to 16 is less than half. We've all gotten hit by claims, including commercial carriers in the marketplace over the last few years, as the industry gets extraordinarily challenging. It's important that we have the reserves to ride through those. So Health Trust, as an example, had 20% as its target for reserves, had about a 15% spike in claims, was able to pay all claims, not issue an assessment. Our lowest point was about 5%. We've built up to today about 10.6%. We're aware of two other risk pools that had lower reserve targets in accordance to their operating agreements with the Secretary of State. They were targeting around the 12 to 16%. When they had a similar spike, one depleted their reserves and closed. We understand one issued a large assessment to the public sector. So 36 months as far as an assessment period would require a risk pool to plan for a projection period for solvency of likely 4 years. We as an organization, through our external actuaries, Milliman, targeted 5-year solvency period. We determined to have enough in reserves to make sure we have a 95% chance of solvency over a 5-year period. In order to allow groups to pay over a 36-month period, you would need to plan to have enough to at least have 4 years to allow those payments to come in so that there's not a scenario where you're insolvent without an immediate payment. And that payment can cause real challenges for the municipal entities to pay. So we believe that while we're not an assessable risk pool, that solvency period is closer to the level that would be appropriate and add protection for the political subdivisions of New Hampshire. It is our read that the bill as written, and one of our main reasons for support, is we felt that it did acknowledge that there are non-assessable risk pools in the state. That has been the case for the 40 years of New Hampshire's history. We're the largest risk pool, we're the oldest risk pool predating RSA 5B. RSA 5B, when it was adopted in 1987, the legislature affirmed the models that were in place, ours being chief among them. So we felt that this bill acknowledges through the language, if an assessment if a risk pool by agreement is assessable, that would have some clear legislative intent that both models are allowed to operate in the state and both can provide value to the covered individuals and political subdivisions and protection for the taxpayers. One last item I will say is risk pools work. We have seen the commercial market be in a challenging position because of rate increases that risk pools, all three risk pools have issued. A lot of member groups, cities, towns, school districts have gone out to bid over the last couple of years. The vast majority have stayed with a risk pool because they've found that the coverage and the cost is better than what's available in the commercial market. We were all created to serve the public sector. We meet the needs of the public sector. That's our sole focus within the state of New Hampshire as a nonprofit. And so risk pools work, and if they have the appropriate reserve level and the appropriate understanding with their groups as to whether they're assessable or non-assessable, they can be extraordinarily successful, continue to be extraordinarily successful for the state of New Hampshire. It's as best I could summarize.
I didn't know if Jennifer wanted, or Jean wanted
I have
to
nothing
make
to add.
anything before I open it up for questions from the senators.
No, thank you.
Okay, questions from the senators. Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, guys. So in the 40 years that we've had risk pools, there's been a lot of advances in medicine. I mean, there's really like a lot. 40 years ago, there wasn't that much you could really do to intervene in a lot of diseases. But over the 40 years, that has really changed. A lot of new drugs, a lot of new interventional technologies. Maybe it's time to look at a world where extraordinary claims can happen, which would lead one to think, at least lead me to think, that a higher reserve level might be a good idea. Although, am I right in thinking that you're planning a 20% reserve, but you think it should be at least 32%?
Thank you.
That'd be a big hit, wouldn't it?
Thank you for your question. I very much appreciate it. So the average in the country through AGRIP is 34 to 38%. In New Hampshire, there's been pressure from the Secretary of State over the years to have lower reserves, prioritizing a return of surplus back to the political subdivisions. So for example, during the COVID years, we gave back approximately $57 million to the political subdivisions. 2 years later, we needed to raise $60 million. And so if we had retained those funds, you would have less volatility. That's the first and foremost. The start of your question, absolutely astute. That is what we and the entire industry are facing right now. We attend tons of conferences, so do our vendors. We have consultants, our actuarial firms. The cost trend, the medical and prescription trend in America is growing faster than anybody would have thought, mainly due to new technologies, increased utilization, et cetera, et cetera. So for example, there's CAR T-cell therapies, a specific type of cancer treatment. It's approximately $700,000 just for the therapy itself, never mind the associated costs. So you total over $1 million when one of those comes into your population, as an example. There are gene therapies that are listed and approved through the FDA that are $6 million per treatment at this point in time. So to put that into context, We are covering our costs plus a reasonable rebuild. Over the last few years, we've rebuilt approximately $10 million each year. So we cover our costs plus an additional amount to replenish those reserves that we had utilized to pay earlier for costs. One or two claims could be of the level of derailing that rebuild, which is why it is so important to not be at a level where you're planning year to year solvency over a 12-month period, that you're looking over a 5-year period. We don't build additional margin into our rates. Some commercial carriers do that. What's very important to us, we try to rate as accurately as possible for the public sector, not overcharge and have a return of surplus. But there is just such significant volatility. You used to be able to plan that medical trend was about 5 to 6% per year. Now we're seeing medical trend that is 14% at times. We're seeing across the country average trends around 9-10% based on various sources. Specialty medication is absolutely driving a lot of it as well. And right now, less than 1% of the population is driving more than half of the entire prescription drug spend. I will say, and I included an informational chart in the packet here, Health Trust did not deplete reserves, did not issue assessments. I know that there's been some information, bless you, that has gone around in the past. I want to be very clear, and I have additional information I can hand out if there are any questions about that. At no point did we deplete reserves. Our lowest point was about 5%, and then we rebuilt and are now about 10.6%. We did not issue assessments to our political subdivisions that are member groups. We are a non-assessable risk pool. We use the reserves to cover any expenses within a period of coverage that are unanticipated, and then we replenish over a multi-year period by adding a bit to future prospective rates to replenish. And so having that higher reserve of 20% is what let us handle the COVID period and this surge without doing assessments. So we went from 20 to 15. If we had started at 15, it would have been 15 to 0, and then you'd be in a spot where you need to raise additional funds. Certainly being at a higher level, 34, 38%, the level of protection is extremely significant that risk pools enjoy all throughout the country.
Thank you.
Additional questions? It's my turn. Last time we were here, and you were offered higher reserves. You wouldn't commit at that point. Now you're willing to commit to a number?
I thank you for your question. I very much appreciate that. And that moment's played through my head quite a bit, so I thank you. What we were saying at the time is we very much want a system that contemplates the changing market and ties to the changes that may occur 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. The 12 to 16% is a deterministic fixed amount. We believe that fixed amount is far too low. But even more preferable to that would be a true system that takes into account things like underwriting risk, investment risk, and other changes in the market. That's the RBC system that is used all throughout the country. When I say 34 to 38%, that is the factual, concrete, from AGRIP themselves, average for health risk pools. Every health risk pool across the country, that's the average that they actually hold as the latest data. So the 34% is just simply contributions versus reserves. And then the 38% is if you do what's called contribution leverage, which is a common mechanism in the industry. I can confidently say somewhere in that range, 30, et cetera, would be an extremely comfortable spot to be if there was a number that was set in statute as a specific number. Our actuaries themselves, I can get the number as of the latest, because I did translate it to the percent of contributions. Again, we use a different stochastic methodology, but I was able to translate it so that we're all talking the same language, percent of contributions. When they did the study over the summer for year ending 6/30/2025, their recommendation had an upper end of 28%. And
What's the dollar figure on that?
28% of our reserves, that would be $145 million for our risk pool. We do approximately $500 million a year
And the
flow through the
percentage rate
organization.
for contributions is when I've seen your actuaries' reports before, they gave you an upper end for the target, but they also gave you a percent of contributions that you should be asking for. Is that the case here also?
It's the same analysis. What they do is they do a range, and so the range is the range they produce is 90 to 145 million.
Yep.
That translates to 17 to 28%. And there's assumptions for the bottom end of the range, and there's assumptions for the top end of the range. A full copy of the report is publicly posted right on our website as well. And so I believe the pricing that you're referring to is at that upper end of the range. It presumes that it's the rate increase that's due, plus no more than 5% additional for a rebuild. So that's the level that you would need to effectively have your long-term costs plus 5%.
I have not gone into the actuary's report since last year.
Sure.
Okay. And I used the data that was in your annual report to do that and the minutes from your meeting. All right. And they gave you 3 different upper ranges and 3 different percentages depending on whether you were going to rebuild the fund in 1 year, 2 years, or multiple years. And from the minutes of those meetings, I was disappointed to see that they took 1 out of column A and 1 out of column C, which did not compute to doing what the actuary said. And so that is the reason for these questions is, you know, they gave you an upper limit, and the 90 million and the 145 are pretty much consistent with the numbers from the report that I saw a year ago. But then the percentages of money that you were getting in was higher in the lower year and less in the later year because of that difference in the goal. So that's what I'm trying to get you to talk to me about.
I absolutely thank you for that clarification. I understand what you're referring to now. Just one clarification, that 5% I was referring to was the lower end of the range scenario. So our actuaries each year, we retain Milliman, they're external actuaries. They determine the rate to cover projected claims and expenses for the upcoming rating period. So that's set. That is a solid rate. Then as a non-assessable risk pool, we have something called a capital risk charge. So how much are we going to add on top of that rate to help replenish those reserves? And that's the number with the exhibit that you're referring to. And so when that came, if there was a rebuild from say 23 million, which was our low point, up to a minimum of 90, if you were going to try to do that in 1 rating cycle, what charge would you add to it if you were going to do it in 2 rating cycles versus 3? So as an example, there was one report that as an example, if we wanted to rebuild in 2 rating cycles, it would be a 6.2% capital risk charge. Our board voted to adopt a 5.3% capital risk charge, which rebuilt in just over the 2.5-year period, or was expected to rebuild over the 2.5-year period. What happened is the claims trend continued to spike. So it's about how quickly you choose to replenish. Now, interestingly, replenishing all in 1 year puts you in a worse financial position, because if you were to try to add that much onto rates and collect all at once, you would have adverse selection occur within the market where most of your well-performing groups leave. Therefore, your total premiums going down. The groups that are remaining are on average higher risk because they couldn't get a favorable quote elsewhere in the commercial insurance market, as an example. And so you're likely to be in a worse financial position as an organization. Now, you can't wait forever. So where is that reasonable line to say, if we add this amount, we will accomplish our rebuild, plus retain the groups we need, not from a competitive standpoint, but from a good mixture of healthy groups to offset the unhealthy groups within the population as a risk pool. Our organization has operated for many years as the limit being 5% is what we could add to replenish without having that adverse selection trigger. When the rebuild didn't rebuild as quickly as expected, the board did add that or increase that to 5.3. The last 2 rating cycles, we were at 5.3%. And we've been successful. We have had several groups leave. We've had several groups join. On the whole, we've retained the mix of well-performing groups and groups that are having some struggles within their population. We have rebuilt a $10 million gain in fiscal year 2024. We had a $9.5 million gain in fiscal year 2025. We have over a $10 million gain already this year in fiscal year 2026. And again, to stress, that's covering all costs, all claims, all administration, even with these spikes that are happening within the market, plus having that reasonable amount going to steadily rebuilding reserves.
I certainly would like to get a copy of your actuary's report so that I can review it. And are you up to date in all of the reporting required by the Secretary of State at this time?
We absolutely are. There's an annual filing that we do. That is the only reporting that is required through statute or by the Secretary of State. We did that in early October. That includes copies of all of our actuarial reports, so our capital adequacy reserve report, IBMP report, PDR report, our audited financials, our rate letters, our bylaws. Those all go once a year. We hand delivered them the same week that our board approved rates in early October. Most of that information is publicly available right on our website. We can certainly provide anything that anybody's interested in. Additionally, for over 2 years now, we have been providing monthly financial statements voluntarily to the Secretary of State every single month for a couple of years. There's no additional information that's required or requested, but if it was, we would certainly strive to provide anything. We included minimal information in the packet beyond the comparison, but we are a transparent organization and are more than happy to go through any information or provide any information that this committee may like.
If we took a tact where you did not have to return certain overages to the communities and created a fund that would benefit those cities and towns or organizations, and they would retain some interest in that money, could you go along with that kind of a scenario where, because I do agree that COVID, the reduced claims during COVID and having to return that money was not a good thing for risk pools, okay? So I'm trying to look at something that would retain that money somewhere, but still the individual organization, like if someone pulled out, they would be able to pull the money out of that for their use or use that for premiums in future years. Mm-hmm. Could some scenario like that, could you work with that?
Any scenario or system that has adequate funds within the system to ensure solvency is something I would be very interested in working together on. There are different risk pool models throughout the country. There is this idea of member balance and member equity. Generally, risk pools do retain the funds and use them for something called rate stabilization. We used to as an organization in the past. So instead of returning funds in a good year, you hold those funds and use them to quite literally lower the rate that they would get in a bad year, thereby leaving things more stable for political subdivisions. That's the number one thing that is done to my knowledge. It's important to note the funds that are held can be invested too. So as an example, when we ended up withdrawing or taking our money out of the investments, we had a $9 million realized gain. So that's $9 million that the public sector didn't have to contribute. And so the money can grow. It can be used for rate stabilization. Absolutely interested in finding a way to ensure that there is the correct amount of money in the system while assuring everybody of oversight into those funds and their adequacy and making sure that there's proper use for them.
Senator Rosenwald, you had a question?
I do, and because our questions have veered off a bit from the bill before us, I hope you'll indulge me. I have two questions. Do you know where most states house their risk pools? Is it the Department of State? Is it the insurance departments?
I
Do you
do.
know?
And I said I would be transparent, so I'll say this in the interest of transparency. Most risk pools are not regulated. Most risk pools are operating for the good of the political subdivision. So they're not under the Secretary of State. They're not under the insurance department. They're effectively self-governing and ensuring that they have adequate funds and that the rates work. Now, some have moved to insurance department. Some have increased reporting and transparency. I will honestly say in about 2 years of attending meetings through national risk pool organizations, most risk pools today are more concerned about having too much in funds and determining what's the appropriate level and how to give back through what's being discussed here. So I mentioned the average is 32, 34%. That means that there are those that have well above that, and they're determining on their own behalf how to give those funds back to the interest of the political subdivisions that they serve.
Thank you. And one more question. if I
Well-
could. When Health Trust is considering taking on a new member,
Sure.
do you look at their claims history and do you ever reject anybody?
So Health Trust does not decline to quote anybody. That has been one of our founding principles. It is something that has been discussed again recently because the market is getting challenging, and the board did reaffirm their commitment that we are here to serve the public sector of New Hampshire, and that means all groups within the public sector of New Hampshire. As far as looking at their claims experience, the answer is generally yes. If it's a small group, so 50 or less, they go into a pool with a pool rate. We do not look at their claims experience, nor is their claims experience available because it's two reasons. One is you could easily identify who those individuals are with such a small population. The second is it's not reliable. The statistics don't work out. And so generally in the industry, if it's 50 or less, you're going into a pool rate or a shelf rate or some sort of small group rate. That's what we do. Every entity that is 50 or above, we do request 2 years of claims data. We can quote off of 12 months, but we request 2 years of claims data, and that feeds into our underwriting process. Every group that's between 50 to 1,000 lives gets rated by our external actuaries through a credibility weighting process where, depending on their size, some part of their rate is their own experience, and then some part of their rate is the experience of the overall renewal. And by joining together, and that's the pool part of risk pooling, by having a bit of that shared experience, it ensures a more stable experience for everybody. If there's one political subdivision that has a CAR T cell therapy, as an example, that's a mechanism where some brunt of that is borne by their peers. And then the next year, if a different one has it, right? And overall, that results in a much more stable rate for all political subdivisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Waters, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to return to the comments you made just a few minutes ago about the investment income off of the risk pool. And I heard what you said, that the $9 million or, whatever it may be, but that was then, essentially kept in the fund so that it would reduce the amount of assessment. Are there any models out there where, in fact, each year the earnings from the investment is returned to municipalities?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say that it's a shade of exactly what we're talking about. And if you bear with me on a very short hypothetical, if, as an example, we were allowed to retain 30% in reserves, if we were at that 30% level, each and every year, I contemplate there would still be a return of surplus to the member groups. And so if investments had an earning or if claims were better than expected, once you're fully replenished, the return of surplus for the benefit of the political subdivision should happen. Risk pools should not retain reserves forever and have them grow without measure. It's where is that appropriate line? If it was 30% in line with the insurance industry generally, with risk pools across the nation, I think you could comfortably be there. The challenge is we, hindsight being 2020, but again, with pressure from the Secretary of State to lower reserves, we were at 20% and had that return of surplus of 57 million. That was, in hindsight, too low. Now, it did still allow us to pay all claims, remain solvent, not issue any sort of assessment, but that return of surplus line, that maximum reserve line, should be somewhere, again, in my opinion, that's higher. I said 34 to 38% through AGRIP. The insurance industry overall is 33%. The AGRIP does say risk pools hold more than the average insurer because rate stability is so important to the public sector. I know RBC has been thrown around. 600% RBC works out to about 29%. The upper end that our actuaries say is 28%. So you can see everything's landing around that 30% mark, not 12 to 16.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Kurt, from Laconia.
Good afternoon. Kirk Beatty, City Manager, City of Laconia, speaking on in favor of Senate Bill 605. City of Laconia was one of the communities that was hit with a couple different assessments last year. They totaled, between the city and the school, just over $1 million. I will speak on the city side. When we got that bill, it was due upon receipt. And the caveat that went along with that was we were told that they wouldn't be able to continue to process our bills and payments if it wasn't paid on at that time. So certainly, of course, we did that. That was coupled, and it's not in the same, it's in the same vein, but it's, that was coupled with a really significant increase in our insurance through that same pool at that time. So it was sort of a double whammy that we were hit with. We were fortunate. We were able to pay ours at the time, although it dipped into a new fiscal year. The school, which was a higher one of over $800,000, they were able to pay, but they took one of their reserves and essentially depleted that reserve for it. The only thing I was going to say was, municipalities, we all know that it's very difficult to budget as it is. We try to keep it as low as we can. Laconia is a tax cap community, so we really have to be careful with that. So to be able to have wiggle room within a budget for significant amounts of assessments unexpected can be very difficult. Having the opportunity, if needed, to spread out a payment is certainly something that we would speak in favor of.
Questions from the senators? Are you a member of any of the boards or a member of the anything?
We use actually 3 of the risk pools. Primex for our risk management. We do use Health Trust for our dental, and we were with NHIT, which is where our assessment came from for our health insurance, which we separated from that during that whole transition period, and we went with school care on both the city and the school side.
But you don't sit on any of their boards or?
We have representatives on both school care and Health Trust. I don't personally know.
The city of Laconia, though?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Whether they're board members or they just sit on as representatives, I'm not sure, but we do have representatives that are part of those organizations.
If you'd clarify for me that in an email, I'd appreciate it.
Be glad to, sir.
You can send it right to the committee and it'll go to everybody.
I will take care of that.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Margaret? And we'll save Lisa for last.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Margaret Burns. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Municipal Association here in support of Senate Bill 605. This is a simple bill that does 2 major things. First, it recognizes that 2 distinct models of risk pools can operate in this state by making it clear that if the pool is accessible, that will be stated in the bylaws or in the member agreement or other contractual document. Allowing more than one model of risk pool to operate is consistent with national standards. It's consistent with AGRIP, the Association of Governmental Risk Pools, and it also allows political subdivisions in New Hampshire to make a choice about the model of risk pool they would like to join or no risk pool at all. That is up to them. The other piece that is important about this bill is that it increases clarity. As I mentioned before, the bill requires that if the pool has an accessible model, that will be made clear to members in some way, either in the bylaws, member agreement, or other document. If this had been the case a year or so ago, there likely would have been significantly less confusion from political subdivisions, cities, towns, and school districts about the assessments that they may have received, whether those assessments needed to be paid, and why those assessments were happening to them. As for the repayment of 36 months mentioned in the bill, NHMA is neutral on a time period for repayment and neutral on whether 36 months is a reasonable time period. I would simply mention that giving members of accessible risk pools an option to pay over some period of time is critical for those members that are not able to make a payment depending on the size of the assessment, or if they were not expecting that assessment that year, it's competing with other interests, and so on and so forth. For these reasons, we are in support of Senate Bill 605, and I would also like to provide to the committee a letter signed by several mayors in support of Senate Bill 605 as well.
Okay, and for the record, would you state any association NHMA has with any of the risk pools out there?
Yes, we are a member of Health Trust.
And do you or any member of NHMA have a seat on the board or the governing body?
No, sir.
Questions from the senators? Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And Lisa.
That's right, JCON is Mary Key.
Introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Chairman Gray and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I'm Lisa Duquette, and I'm the Executive Director for School Care. I have passed out written testimony, and I will not read it to you. But the highlight of it is that we are not concerned with the overall intent of SB 605, but we are concerned that it could weaken the protection the poolings provide for the members. And quite frankly, School Care is one of the pools that has experienced the dynamic of rising healthcare costs and found itself in a situation last year where the board authorized the issuance of an assessment. Now, the situation was that we had very high escalating claims. We had actuaries and legal advisors reviewing this, and quite frankly, it wasn't identified early enough because there were these rising costs. What I would tell you is, I think you all know healthcare claims are complex, rapidly changing. Even actuarial forecasts can't predict high-cost claimants. We saw over a 30% increase in high-cost claims over $75,000. We saw rising costs in terms of specialty drugs. And School Care found itself in a position where in June of 2023, we had nearly 30 million in reserves. And at June 30, 2025, based on the actuarial studies, we were in a deficit position of approximately 4.7 million. And that is when we received those reports in August of 2025, where we quickly began to work with the regulator, with a number of advisors, and determined that an assessment needed to be issued to the tune of 30 million. It was not easy. It was very hard. We do understand the pressures that it put, but it was clearly driven by the claims experience. And there's only one place that contributions come from, and that's from those member entities that agreed to join the pool and share in that risk. We too, for 30 years, had operated without an assessment. The other part about this bill that we just have concerns about it being over a period of time is that claims need to be paid right away. We don't have 3 years to pay. If school care in this scenario had applied a 3-year collection of the assessment, I would be here telling you today that school care would be closing its doors and that one of the options available to public entities in New Hampshire would be gone. We currently serve about 25,000 individuals in the state, approximately 100 public entities. But in a short 6-month period of time, working with our members, those invoices did go out and say due upon receipt. They were issued on October 1st, due by January 1 to avoid interest. And then we further listened, talked with members, and came up with a solution whereby a number of the groups have until next fiscal year to pay that without any interest and can put it into their budgets. So within a short 6-month period of time today, I can tell you that school care is financially solvent. We did have a board meeting yesterday. At that board meeting, we received or was delivered by the auditors our independent audit report, and that draft financial report was approved by our board yesterday. So we are in a very good position. As of December 31st, 2025, we'll be reporting to our members tomorrow through our quarterly membership meeting that our reserves are at 12.9%. So we have gone from negative 2% at June 30, 2025 with a $30 million assessment back to 12.9% and back on stable footing.
Questions? Questions, Senator Rosen?
Thank you. I'm trying to remember back to Senate Bill 297. Didn't it build in a period of ramp up time so that the trusts wouldn't have to assess members a whole lot more really quickly, but had, I think, a 3-year period in there, 2 or 3 years to build up their reserves. So it would avoid, I think, the issue you're concerned about, that claims couldn't be paid and individual employees could get stuck with a non-negotiated rate for healthcare.
I think Senate Bill 297 had a few different pieces in it, which we did support as amended by this Senate. So, there were a number of guardrails and triggers, as we would say. In other words, notifications. One of the hard things that school care has received, and we're very aware of, is we didn't have the knowledge soon enough, and therefore we weren't communicating early enough. We now have protocol in place that is going to enable us on a go-forward basis that this will not be an announcement that comes out. We will be regularly reporting. The part that you're speaking to is the part about rebuilding. So not if you are in a negative position. Ours went literally from 12 to 14% to negative 2%. That situation would require some sort of immediate assessment. If, however, Senate Bill 297 was passed, you're absolutely correct. If you went below 12, there was a mechanism to rebuild through the rates. If you went below 4%, it needed to be an assessment invoice, and that is something that school care would support, a model like that.
Additional questions, Senator Waters?
Your written testimony mentions the concern about if you have 36 months to pay. Remember, the parks during that period will not be available to pay for what they have to cover or whatever. Yeah, 36. But, wouldn't you or couldn't you have in your contract, don't you or couldn't you have in your contract something that covers that eventuality, that somebody would still be liable to you if they did leave for the assessment that was being parceled out over 36 months?
It would need to be in the agreement, but it is not in agreements today. But that's a good point. Excellent. Well taken.
Okay, I will ask you the same thing that I asked Health Trust, is that your actuary's report be sent to the committee so that I can review that. And you said you just had your annual meeting and you're having your membership meeting. Copy of those minutes would be appreciated also to the committee for their review. Any other questions from the committee? Seeing
Thank
none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is the last person who has signed up. Any last nickels out there? A lot of people out there that haven't spoken. Okay, with that, we'll call the committee hearing to a close, and our business today being complete, we are adjourned.
All right.
Yeah.